Welcome to another installment of Echo Worm Live. We do this every couple of weeks, typically at about 5 o'clock Eastern Time on every other Thursday, where we just talk about some questions that you guys have about either my recordings or just the stuff, questions about characters, motivations, plot lines that are going on in the books. Maybe you missed something that you want some clarification on, or you just have some questions that you want to ask. Our live chat is always open, so if you guys are in the live chat and you want to ask questions that I'm comfortable answering on camera, you're more than welcome to do so. We're very happy to have you. These typically go a couple hours or so. Probably going to wrap things up in about 2 hours time. But the big thing to start with is we will not have a live stream in 2 weeks. We're actually going to postpone it for a third week beyond. The next couple weeks are a little spotty for me. I'm actually, I mentioned this before on camera, my wife and I are going across the pond over to the United Kingdom. So I will not be here in 2 weeks. I will be on a plane coming back from London, but we will do it the following week. So 21 days from now, that is August 29th. And I think I'm also going to move it up either a half hour or an hour. So probably 4 o'clock Eastern on August 29th, if you guys want to put that in your calendars, if that's something you're interested in doing. But I'm going to check the live chat here. Few people in there. Xpogo Sam says, I'll kick it off, I guess. How is chapter 12 of Radiation Effect going? It's going. So, right, if you guys are unaware, The Radiation Effect is a book that I'm currently actively writing. And it's kind of an experiment because as I'm writing each chapter, once I finish a chapter, I will record it as an audiobook and then post it on the channel. So you can find it in the folder or the playlist titled Radiation Effect. I think there are 12 chapters out there already. I could be wrong. Maybe there's just 11. But whatever we're up to, I've been working on the next one for several weeks now. And I'm actually doing 2 at once. The following chapter that's not out yet is kind of a long one and not a lot happens. And so I've not necessarily been struggling to find the motivation to finish it, but struggling to progress the plot to where it needs to be for the next chapter. And the next chapter is a really, really big one. So I'm kind of writing 2 at once. For Patreon members, it will be out at the same time, roughly, probably one and then one the next day. And the channel will get it probably a week apart. But otherwise good. The following 2 chapters are on their way. But yes, hopefully coming to you very, very soon. Perkabest says, you got your Starbucks order as always. Always do. Never failed. Let's see here. Saber6 says, I started reading The Radiation Effect. Great book so far. I'm on the Homecoming chapter. That was one of my favorite chapters to write. And I actually wrote that a long time ago. That was one of the chapters. So I've been writing this book for a very long time. And the current draft is the way it is. There's things that I'm going to change about it a little bit. But I've always been into writing romance chapters. Or at least drama chapters. And so a lot of the romance stuff that you see has existed for several years. Or has been slightly changed or whatever. So that Homecoming chapter I've been sitting on for a very long time. But I enjoy that one quite a bit. Rowan Garrell says, cool, someone else is using a screen reader. Matteo Bartholin says, solve this problem. Today you guys will give a math test. You have to pass this test at all costs. If you want to give me a math problem, I'll try to answer it. But Pergabest says, let me guess your acai drink. Feel free to go ahead. Same thing every week. I'm very predictable. I'm going to jump over to some pre-prepared questions. I have about 4 pages of questions. So if you guys have questions, again, feel free to answer them in the chat. If for whatever reason we don't get to your question by the end of the video or the end of the stream today, feel free to drop it in the actual comments, not just the live chat, and I will pick up on that for the next live stream in a few weeks' time. But first question today of the pre-prepareds comes from Kiv Patel, who says, would you please do Trials of Apollo when you're done with Heroes of Olympus? Yes, I am planning on doing Trials of Apollo. I am going to take a break from the Greek stuff. Just for me personally, I've been doing this for a year and a half, and I just need a slight break from all the Greek stuff just to refresh, especially after doing Wrath of the Triple Goddess. I'm going to do Wrath of the Triple Goddess in less than 2 days, so wish me luck with that. But we're going to skip and do the Red Pyramid first. So we'll do the 3 Kane Chronicles books after Blood of Olympus, and then we'll come back and do Trials of Apollo. That just kind of gives me a mental break from Percy Jackson, which, like I said, I've been doing for, by the time we're done, will be almost 2 years. So yes, we'll do Blood of Olympus, we'll do the 3 Kane Chronicles books, and then we'll start with the Hidden Oracle, I believe is the first one. Duke says, are you going to read any of the spin-off books of the Percy Jackson universe like Sun and the Star? Yes, if you can see it behind me, it's actually this one right here. Problem with Sun in the Star is it takes place. It is of the Percy Jackson books and side books that are out right now. I believe the Sun in the Star is the last one in the timeline. So I don't want to read it now, or I don't want to post it now. I have been recording it. That's why it's in the pile behind me. I don't want to post it until we're done with Trials of Apollo completely, because there's a significant spoiler in Trials of Apollo that appears in The Sun and the Star. So yes, we will do that one specifically. The other ones that I'm going to sprinkle at you are the Camp Jupiter Classified, Camp Half-Blood Confidential. I've already done the Demigod Files and Demigod Diaries, and then I also have Percy Jackson's Greek Gods and Greek Heroes behind me, as well as the Percy Jackson Kane Chronicles crossover called Demigods and Magicians. Perkabest says, you got me into Percy Jackson. Well, thank you very much. That is surprising to me, but pleasantly surprising. I'm happy that I could be your gateway into these books that I am very passionate about. Xpogo Sam says, what spawned the addition of your Easter eggs in House of Hades? Easter eggs, period, I started adding because people were stealing my content, and it makes it easier for me to track it down if I know where to look. So I'm trying not to do it every chapter. I know it gets a little distracting if I do it every chapter, but then sometimes I'm just reading, and I shouldn't say that I'm ADHD, but I definitely go off tangent a lot when I talk, and you guys might notice that on my live streams. But when I'm reading Percy Jackson, the humor, my mind transitions sometimes. So sometimes I'll add little lines from Leo, or sometimes I'll be thinking of something. And for example, Nico, at the end of one of these last couple chapters, my patrons will be aware of this. It's coming up on the channel in a few weeks here. Nico kills someone, and then he yells, "Be gone." And for the life of me, I could not stop myself from saying "Be gone, thought." So I added that. It fits with Nico's character, in my opinion, based on where he's at in Blood of Olympus. But anyway, so I've been adding these little Easter eggs every once in a while. Some people really like them. Some people really hate them. I try not to do it too often, or I'm trying not to do it too often because I know it can be distracting. But for the main purpose of it makes it easier to track down my content. So say someone were to take my recording, put it through, for example, this is something I've given permission to, but just as an example, if someone were to take my recording, put it through a vocal filter so that Walker Scobell is using my recording through AI, then I can track it down as my recording, despite the fact that it's not my voice, because I've added those little Easter eggs. So anyways, that's the backstory to it. Saber6 says, can you describe the appearance of Emma and Ken, or Kent from the Radiation Effect? If you mean their physical appearance, yeah. So Emma is very short and looks very young, and this will become a plot point later on. It's not just something that I've added for no reason. There are very few things in that book that I add for no reason. But Emma is, so they're all 14, 15 years old. They're freshmen in high school. Emma looks like she is about 12 years old. Very young looking, very small. She's probably 4'11" to maybe 5'1", where the rest of them are all kind of around 5'7" to 6'2". So Emma's significantly shorter than the rest of them. She's got kind of dirtyish yellow blonde hair. She's very tan, naturally. Trying to think what else. She's very conventionally attractive, but she doesn't see herself as conventionally attractive because of the fact that she feels so insecure. And then Kent is interesting because he's kind of he's half native, half Italian. So he's very dark skinned. He's got dark brown hair. He's shorter than Jordan, but taller than Johnny. So let's place him at about 5'10", 5'11". Not muscular necessarily, but not super skinny, and he's very, very average looking. Also conventionally attractive, but also doesn't see it. So part of his character arc, if you guys have come across the chapter titled The Party, one of Kent's big things is he doesn't pick up on social cues with women. And so one thing that Jordan is trying to help him with is making him realize, hey, open your eyes to you may not be able to get the girls that you want firsthand, but if you open your eyes and don't take for granted what's in front of you, things go your way. Is kind of one of the big barriers Kent has to overcome, because his backstory is kind of interesting. But anyways, Duke says, I liked in Mark of Athena chapter 7 or 8 where you did a little self-promo of your YouTube channel. Yeah, I usually do that one per half, right? So I split the books in half. I'll throw a little Echo Worm Easter egg in one of the halves. Rowan Garrell says, I love the Easter egg with the turtle. Thank you very much. Let's go to a question from Coda Gill, who says, why did you only post one chapter today? Well, we post 2 chapters every day. One at about... I'm in Central Time, so for me it's midnight and 10 a.m. East Coast, it's 1 a.m. and 11 a.m. So the 1 a.m. chapter is going to be a non-Percy Jackson property, or a non-Rick Riordan property typically. Right now it's Dune, and then the 11 o'clock one is going to be a Rick Riordan property. So right now it's the Blood of Olympus. There are some exceptions. Sometimes I will add double chapters if they're really, really short. Or with the case of House of Hades, I decided to... because the book that it was paired with, which was, I think, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, because that one was so short, I decided to do the rest of it 2 a day. And so that's why you might be like, why is he only doing one Blood of Olympus chapter now, whereas House of Hades he was doing 2 a day? That's why. Typically, it'll be 1 a day per book. Saber6 says, how did you come up with their powers in the radiation effect? Good question. A very good question, because it's something that I constantly think about. At one point, I would have said it was random. Some of their abilities, as I've been writing this book for the last 8 years of my life, have changed because of the fact that I want them more tied. I don't want them random necessarily. I want them more tied to either their life experience or their personalities. So, for example, Kent, he's always been super speed. But one thing that I've been using with his super speed then is... how does that go with his emotional state? He jumps from one thing to another. He's very, very unfocused, but he rushes through things. And so that's kind of linked to that. Whereas Johnny is very, he's described early on as being very just like not all there, like has no emotional quotient, is like completely unaware of people around him, is very factual. And that is based on the fact that he remembers everything. So he's kind of this walking computer, and doesn't quite have the humanity, or perceived to have the humanity that some of these other characters have. Emma, I won't do any spoilers with her abilities. Margot is very, this kind of jump on things, like very to the point. Quite literally, lack of, pun not intended necessarily, but her special ability is she has metal claws, kind of like Sabretooth from the X-Men. And then Jordan sees everything. So whereas Johnny is kind of blind to everything, his brother is the opposite, because his brother has the ability to see through walls. He's got this kind of echolocation thing going on. So, and then Liz is kind of random, to be honest with you. Rachel was here, says, I'm not used to hearing you not reading Percy Jackson. Well, there's plenty of non-Percy Jackson content on the channel if you want to check it out. But yes, I know people are often very surprised either hearing me just talk normally or just seeing my face, because they're not used to not thinking of Percy. Question from Laura Marie, not really a question, but Laura Marie Lockwood says, I hope you complete this series one day. Me too. A lot of people will ask me, they're like, are you going to do Blood of Olympus? And I think it'd be really funny if I just said no. Like, I've read 9 books so far, but I'm just going to stop before we finish one of the series. Like, why not? Perkabest says, do you like Harry Potter or Percy Jackson better? My answer is kind of weighted based on the fact that I grew up with Harry Potter. I've been reading Harry Potter since I was 5 years old. And so from the perspective of someone who grew up with it, whereas Percy Jackson came to me later in life, I mean, not too much later, but it wasn't one of my childhood books. It was one of my middle school books, right? I grew up with Harry Potter, and as someone who really likes literary analysis, Harry Potter is more tuned to me. It's a lot more... Percy Jackson is a very feel-good story, whereas Harry Potter is a very analytical, thematic story, if that makes any sense. So for me, personally, I like Harry Potter more, but if I want a feel-good story, Percy Jackson is always one that I will go to. Like Harry Potter, I don't read to feel good unless it's like the first couple books. You don't read Order of the Phoenix to feel good about yourself. Whereas like Percy Jackson, you typically, that's kind of the feeling you get out of most of the books. Saber6 says, what is your favorite demigod power in the books? Good question. My favorite demigod power. I really like Hazel's ability to just raise precious metals out of the ground. I don't know why. I just think that's really funny that she can just like make things grow, kind of like a child of Demeter or a child of Ceres, and just it's precious stones. I've always thought that was funny for some reason. I think most of Percy's skill set is very, very cool. Beyond that, Frank's ability, it's not necessarily... So Frank's is interesting because it's not necessarily a demigod power necessarily, but it's tied to just kind of his history, his family history. So, yeah, Frank's an interesting case because I don't know if that qualifies as a demigod power, but I do like Frank's abilities. Sarah W. says, I think my favorite series of all time is The Hunger Games, and then 39 Clues, and then The Kane Chronicles. I really like The Hunger Games, too. We have a couple questions coming up later on that I'll spoil now, but Hunger Games is next for our Patreon after we get done with Blood of Olympus and... I do apologize, I just kicked my camera. And The Red Pyramid. Perkabest says, Heroes of Olympus, I'm assuming, or Percy Jackson. For me personally, it's Heroes of Olympus. I like the singular perspective of Percy, but I enjoy the world expanse and the storytelling of Heroes of Olympus. I think it's more expansive. I think it's written better. I think it's more thematic, which, like I said with the Harry Potter question, that's kind of how I like things. I really like themes. Percy Jackson and the Olympians is more of an adventure story without too many themes necessarily. It's more of a scavenger hunt type of series, whereas Heroes of Olympus is definitely more thematic. Sarah W. says, I almost forgot there was a live today, but I'm glad I got recommended pretty early. Well, welcome. I'm happy to have you guys here. Sarah W. says, whose perspective do you think we'll get for Sunrise on the Reaping? Haymitch. I'd be shocked if we had any other perspective than Haymitch. Question from two basically the exact same questions, one from Tumblelily and one from Anna DeGraff, both saying, are you going to read Blood of Olympus? Yes, we are currently reading it. The first 6 chapters or so are up on the channel. We'll do one a day until we're done with each half of the book, and then we'll post the full version like we usually do. Question from Alex Scarioshi, who says, will you be doing expanded universe Star Wars books further on? So technically, I may be wrong on this because I grew up prior to Disney Star Wars, right? I was a huge Star Wars fan when I was little. What used to be the expanded universe is now considered the Legends canon, so it's not necessarily canon, but this is all the stuff that I grew up with. So this is all of the Luke Skywalker stuff after Return of the Jedi, which is not conducive to the Disney storyline. It's the storyline where Luke and Leia have 3 kids. Han and Leia have 3 kids. Luke is married to Mara Jade. That is considered either EU or Legends canon. The books that I'm currently reading on the channel, the Jedi Prince series, are a part of that canon. So if you're asking if I will do some in the future, I already have 5 books out. But yes, the New Jedi Order series, is that the one that I'm thinking of doing next? I'm looking behind me. I have a handful of them, but yes, periodically you'll see Star Wars books sprinkled in. Cora says, are you excited for the second series of Percy Jackson and the Olympians? If so, any certain scenes? Yes, I'm excited. I'm excited for it. More so curious to see where they go, because they changed so much in the first season from the book, specifically with character motivations, that I'm very curious what they're going to do with it in the second one. The second one, the book second one, is very much tailored to Annabeth's backstory and Percy's relationship with Annabeth. Not romantic relationship, although we get the start of that there. But it's more so just them finally becoming friends. They're not quite friends at the end of the first book. They're not quite friends at the beginning of the second book. But they really, really develop their friendship into the end of the second book. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to change. I bring this up like every week or every time we do a live stream, but very concerned about the fact that Annabeth witnessed Luke's betrayal in the TV show. That's not something that happens in the books, and that's going to change her character motivations very significantly. I I'm also curious. I mentioned this before. I'm very curious to see if they'll include the Confederate ship. You know what I mean? Like, American media is very much turning away from the history of the Confederacy. So I'm curious how they'll do that, if they'll even include that scene at all, if they'll turn away from it, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of... I mean, these books were written in 2006. That's how old Percy Jackson is now. I was reading something the other day. This is a little off tangent, but I was reading the other day, Annabeth, in the original... Like, when the original books came out, Annabeth was canonically born in 1993. Which is older than I am. Which means that Chalice of the Gods would take place in 2011, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But, anyways, yes, I'm looking forward to it, more so out of curiosity than excitement. I don't know. Like, I enjoyed it very much, but I'm more so curious to see how they change things going forward. Let's see here. Sarah W. says, I'd love to hear from both Haymitch and Plutarch. What characters do you hope appear in Sunrise on the Reaping? I don't know. One thing that I really enjoyed about Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and I'm a huge Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes defender. A lot of mainstream Hunger Games fans were not a fan of it. They weren't a fan of the way it was written. They weren't a fan of characters. I really like it. I'll defend that book till the day I die. I really enjoyed that book. But one thing that made that book so special to me is... apart from maybe 2 or 3 characters and a handful of last names, it was a completely new cast of characters. It was completely removed from the original Hunger Games series. And so for me personally, and I know a lot of people are against this, a lot of people like having the connections to the original series, I would like to see as many non-previous characters as possible. I want a completely new set of characters for the Hunger Games, because we'll have 48, because it's the double event, right? Because if it's Haymitch's year, then there's 48 tributes instead of 24. So we'll have so many more characters. I think we'll see Snow for sure. I think we'll see, like you said, Plutarch. May get an allusion to District 13. We'll see. We may get an allusion to Lucy Gray. But beyond that, I don't know that we'll see anything we're familiar with. And for me, that's okay, because I really enjoyed that. Let's see here. Saber6 says, do you know if Nico and Percy's friendship gets better? It's complicated. I don't want to spoil anything. There are significant challenges to their relationship from both sides, and both sides for very different reasons. It's very complicated, specifically from Nico's side. Like, Percy's side is a little more cut and dry, and Percy doesn't know everything. For the most part, Percy just believes that this guy hates him because of the fact that he killed his sister indirectly. Whereas Nico's feelings toward Percy are a little more complicated than that. Quite a bit more complicated than that. And I don't want to spoil anything for you guys if you haven't read House of Hades. But, yeah, I would like to say that it may get better in the future, but we'll see. Let's see here. Perkabest says, what is your favorite scene in House of Hades? Good question. I'm almost done with Blood of Olympus, so I got to go back and think about House of Hades a little bit. I mean, actually, no, I don't have to think about it. My favorite scene in the entire series, probably, is Leo 49 through 52, which is the Leo Anno Gigia. Those are probably my favorite chapters in the entire series. Let's see here. Cora says, out of all the voices you do in all of Percy Jackson, which is your favorite? Percy Jackson. Good question. Frank, for sure. Definitely Frank, because of the fact that it's my natural accent turned up to 12. I grew up in and around the Canadian border. That's kind of, you know what I mean. Like, I grew up right next to the Canadian border. So with Frank, I just basically turn my accent on and crank it. I get to say a boot, I get to say sorry, I get to say all of the things that I love saying in my Vancouver accent. And being a fan of Vancouver sports teams, that makes it very easy, because that's what I listen to all the time. So yeah, for me, it's absolutely Frank. I enjoy reading for Frank. I am bummed he doesn't have a POV in Blood of Olympus, and it makes me really sad. Let's see here. Sarah W. says, me too. I love how Ballad showed me the progression from 18-year-old Koryo to Dictator Snow. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to see that with Haymitch for Sunrise on the Reaping. If you guys are unaware, this is the upcoming 5th Hunger Games book. It is the second prequel. So in the whole series, it'll be second of 5. It takes place prior to the Hunger Games, but after Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It takes place about 24 years before the first Hunger Games book, and has to do with Haymitch, the mentor of Katniss, and when he was in the Hunger Games. So, let's see here. Are the Saber6 says, are the Hunger Games books hard to get into? I haven't seen the movies yet either. I don't think so. The biggest thing with any story is just allowing yourself to be enveloped in the world. And so with the Hunger Games, you just allow yourself to be a part of that world. I don't think it's super hard to get into. They are a little violent. They are a little introspective. And if you're a 12-year-old getting into introspective fiction for the first time, it might be a little difficult. For me, it was. I read through them. But as I read through them now as an adult, 15, 20 years later, like, it is, I'm coming at it from a different perspective, and I like them even more than I did back then, if that makes any sense. Sarah W. says, when did you read the Hunger Games books for the first time? I read all 3 of them leading into the film, the first film. So I think the first film either came out December of 2012, I think. So I bet you I started reading the first Hunger Games book end of 2011, early 2012, and then I finished this series leading into the first film. Sarah W. says, can you also do an impression of President Snow? Oh, gosh. It's been a long time since I read For Snow. Donald Sutherland just died, my favorite actor of all time who played Snow in the films, and I don't want to do his voice an injustice at the moment, but I don't remember how far off my voice was. I'm sorry, I'm gonna reject that request simply because I don't remember what I used for his voice. I think it was very similar to how I talk naturally, but I don't know. If you want to clarify what my voice was like, but I don't know. Good question. Let's go to a question from Yasin Yafi, who says, are you going to be reading Game of Thrones on YouTube? Probably not, and I don't know how much longer my Fire and Blood videos are going to stay up. Once I'm done with Fire and Blood, all of those videos are going to be transferred over to Vimeo and Patreon. This is for copyright purposes, specifically because there is a show going on. Hunger Games is the same way. Hunger Games we can't do on the channel. So when we do the Hunger Games daily chapters, it'll be interesting to see how we're going to do it. Because of the fact that we can't do Hunger Games on the channel right now, because of the fact that the book is coming out. That is very common with big studio films. So Lionsgate is coming out with first this new book, and then they'll make a film out of it next year or the year after. And so they are like cracking down on Hunger Games type content, even if it's not, even if it's fair use, which is weird. But they have the capability to do so, and the YouTube system favors them over creators. Game of Thrones is the same way, especially with House of the Dragon being an active show at the moment. So Game of Thrones, Fire and Blood, all of that will be available over on Patreon for free, and I will let you guys know when it's out for free. Right now, a lot of it is available at that $3 tier for my patrons. So if you guys want to check out Game of Thrones, I think I have the first 19 chapters of Game of Thrones. There's like 75, 76 chapters in Game of Thrones. I have the first 19 over on Patreon, and then I have a bunch of the Fire and Blood chapters over on Patreon as well. A few on the channel, but those will disappear, like I said, once we get closer to finishing Fire and Blood. I just don't want to get hit with an unnecessary copyright struck because of the fact that the show is going on. Sarah W. says, you don't have to do it in Snow's voice, but I'd love to hear a mini monologue inspired by his character. Oh, man. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open this book that's in front of me, and I'm going to read it in a Snow voice. Luke waited on the couch until all the other boys were gone. When Mr. Hendricks finally shut the front door and rolled out his wheelchair back toward Luke started to blurt out, Mr. Hendricks. It had to be Smits who set the fire, he told me. Mr. Hendricks held up his hand, stopping Luke. Now, he said. Last thing I need right now is to hear any more wild accusations. Think very carefully before you tell me anything. That's as far as I'll go with that. But yeah, Snow's voice is just my voice, but kind of turned up to an elitist tone, if that makes any sense. Kai says, will you be reading the Trials of Apollo? Yes. After Blood of Olympus, I mentioned this earlier. After Blood of Olympus, we're going to not quite do Trials of Apollo right away. We're going to do the 3 Kane Chronicles books. And then once we're done with, I think Serpent's Shadow is the 3rd one. Yeah, once we're done with Serpent's Shadow, then we will do Trials of Apollo. So give it a 3-book break, and then we will do Trials of Apollo. And then we'll just read straight through it. Same as we've been doing Percy Jackson. Let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, Echo be upgrading book delivery. Got a Prime package that contained a certain Blood of Olympus book in it. Yes. If you guys were unaware, and this is maybe more than some of you are capable of doing, which is fine, but I mention Patreon all the time. For as little as $3 a month, you get everything available over on Patreon. So I think for Percy Jackson, we are 3 weeks ahead of the channel. Part 1 of Blood of Olympus is already available over on Patreon for $3 a month. You get all of Dune, you get all of Silver Chair, you get most of the Red Pyramid, which isn't yet available on the channel. I mentioned Game of Thrones. You get early releases of stuff like Artemis Fowl was out, I think, a month or 2 in advance of the channel. So that's $3 a month if you guys have the capability to do so. For $25 a month or more, which, like I said, I know is a lot, but it helps me bypass the costs of, it's basically like you buying a book every month. So you get all of the Patreon content, but then I also, $25 a month or more, every month I send you a copy, a physical copy of what we're reading on the channel. So, like Joseph mentioned, I just sent out a copy of Blood of Olympus, a physical copy of Blood of Olympus to all of my top tier patrons. And so I do that beginning of every month. Like I said, $25 a month or more just helps me offset those costs of doing that. So if you guys want to do that, feel free to sign up if you are able. Sarah W. says, Kane Chronicles is up next. Yes. Red Pyramid will start basically the day after we're done with Blood of Olympus. Joseph Morrill says, I totally forgot to ask you to sign it. Give me something inspirational instead. Something inspirational. That is a very good question. Let me find it here. There's a quote in this book that is very good. I gotta find it. And I don't want you guys to hear dead air. So, Tyrion says to Jon, Tyrion is talking to Jon Snow. Jon talking about being called a bastard. Tyrion says, oh, where's it at here? I can't even find it. I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't find it. Tyrion basically says, all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. Wear insults like armor, and they can never use it to hurt you. So there's your inspirational influence of the day. Sarah W. says, which Kane Chronicles book is your favorite? That's a very interesting question because of the fact that I have only read through the series once. And so I don't remember the individual installments very well. So I will be able to better answer that question when we're done with the series because it's been so long since I've read them. I remember really, really enjoying the first 2 and not really enjoying the 3rd one. So I'm going to say book 2, having not read it in 10 years. But I'm very looking forward to rereading all of them and hoping to redeem the 3rd book. Because I don't think the 3rd book was bad necessarily. I just, it came out around the exact same time that I kind of fell off with the original Percy Jackson series. And I think it was an age thing and a time thing. So I'm going to give you 2 as my answer at the moment. Let's go to a question from Steph Hendo, who says, where did the old chapter videos go? So what I do on the channel is there are some books where I'll take as much time as I want to read, or as much time as I have available to read them, and then I'll just drop them completely on the channel. But I do want to give you guys daily content. So what I've been doing is daily chapters. Right now, like I said, it's Dune and Blood of Olympus. So we'll do a chapter a day, and then as soon as all of those chapters are up, or at least a half of the book is done, then I will post a full compilation of that on the channel. So there should be links to all of the different chapter timestamps if you guys want that as a guide. But otherwise, I usually do that. It just helps clean up the channel. That way there aren't 15,000 videos on the channel. We just get the full form. So once I'm done with Heroes of Olympus, or Blood of Olympus specifically, then instead of having 78, 72, can't remember how many chapters. Instead of having however many chapters are in that book up on the channel, then I'll just have 2 halves of it. Makes it a little cleaner. Joseph Morrill says, Echo does like the books that lead up to conclusions after all, aka Battle of the Labyrinth. So him liking Kane Chronicles Book 2 makes sense. Yes, I have mentioned that before. I love penultimate installments of books. I almost never like the conclusion best. Same way with Hunger Games. I honestly kind of hate Mockingjay. More so the film than anything. But I really like Catching Fire. Let's go to a question from Nathaniel Sargent, who asks about House of Hades. It says Part 2 is unavailable. Is that going to be fixed anytime soon? It should be now. Yes, so that was prior to us being done with House of Hades. The same thing should show up for you for Blood of Olympus. You'll probably, if you click on the Camp Half-Blood video, or the Camp Half-Blood playlist, it'll say something along the lines of 1 video not available, or 2 videos unavailable. Those will come out when we reach that point. I think it's 30 chapters. So once we reach the 30th chapter of Blood of Olympus, then the first half will be available to you guys. Joseph Morrill mentions Starbucks. Yes, you're the second person to mention it. Let's go to a question from Mike Stevens, who says, why are you doing chapter by chapter for Blood of Olympus? We do it for every Percy Jackson book. I just want you guys to get daily content, so you're not waiting on me. And it also gives me not just more motivation, but more incentive to get them out to you faster. So if I wasn't doing daily chapters, then it might take me forever to actually get books out to you, because I'd be doing it at my own pace, and that might be a little slower than 1 a day. So it just kind of inspires me to keep going. Joseph Morrill says, been recording how many times I've seen you drink that particular Starbucks drink. It's every week. It's every week. Sarah W. says, Catching Fire is my favorite too. Maybe it's just me, but I always thought the book should have been blue to match the arena, and Mockingjay should have been red. I understand where you're coming from. I think it's more so because Catching Fire sets up the revolution, and Mockingjay sets up peace, if that makes any sense. I've always interpreted that as the reason for the different colors. Sarah W. says, which Kane Chronicles characters were your favorite? Good question. I really like Iskandar. I prefer Sadie as a POV, but mostly because I enjoy reading with an accent more than I like reading with my natural accent. So I like Sadie better than Carter as a POV character. Yeah, there aren't any really bad characters, I think. I would say I think the character setup is a little weaker than Percy Jackson. It's a little rushed into it. Percy Jackson, I think, felt like it took its time a little bit more than Kane Chronicles did with the setup, but that's okay. I still really like the Kane Chronicles, but I would say Sadie and Iskandar are probably my 2 favorite characters. Bass is a good character. Kai says, favorite book in Heroes of Olympus? Good question. I've always said Mark of Athena. Mark of Athena is always going to be like my personal like nostalgia favorite book. But I think quality-wise, it's got to be House of Hades. Like, House of Hades has some really, really high highs and not a lot of negatives and not a lot of dead space, if that makes any sense. So I really, really enjoyed House of Hades reading through it this time. Sarah W. says, Sadie was really annoying, though, in my opinion. I felt the same way the first time I read it. I really did. Now, rereading it, her tone makes sense, if that makes any sense. And I don't know, like I've mentioned this before. It's the same reason that I prefer Percy over Jason. And not just because we've grown used to him. Jason is a little too vanilla for my liking. And Percy is a little bit more... He's got a little more attitude to him when he narrates. Sadie is a little more turned up in that sense. Sadie's a little more aggressive. That's why a lot of people think of her as annoying. But I enjoyed her. I really have enjoyed reading for her. Whereas Carter, I think, is significantly more laid back, a little more boring, in my opinion. Let's see here. Kai says, will you be reading the Magnus Chase series? Yes, that will be the final of the Rick Riordan series that we read. So we've already done Percy Jackson. We're almost done with Heroes of Olympus. Next we'll do Kane Chronicles. Then we'll do Trials of Apollo. And last but not least, after we're done with Sun and the Star, or maybe even coincidentally with Sun and the Star, depending on when I get that book finished, then we'll do Magnus Chase. Let's go to question from Saber6, who says, do you like other forms of media and entertainment? Movies, cartoons, doing sport? Yeah, so I watch TV fairly religiously, which maybe is a bad thing. I have seen a lot of films, and I've seen a lot of movies. Or same thing, excuse me. A lot of films and a lot of TV shows. I have listened to films in the last several years. It could have been COVID, to be honest with you. The whole just kind of killing the movie industry thing. But I've been watching a lot of TV shows. So yes, I have seen a lot of... I have a whole list. It's like 300 different shows listed. And then once I finish one, it's at the bottom of my list. I just finished, after 2 months, it took me 2 months to get through this show. Usually it takes me maybe a few weeks. 2 months to get through a show called The 100. It's a CW show, came out like 10 years ago. And I finally got through the finale today. And it was terrible. I love the first few seasons. I'm very nostalgic for them, but man, that show falls off. But anyways, that tended aside to say, yes, I'm currently now watching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia for the second time. But then I'm also very, very into sports, if that wasn't obvious, by wearing soccer kits every time we do a live stream, having the different things behind me. So always happy to answer questions about sports too, but I know a lot of people on this live stream are very not sports people. So let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, here's a question that will probably be no. I have Kane Chronicles books and kind of want them signed. Any chance you have a P.O. box that I can send them to get them signed? Yes, I will have you DM me, and I'll give you access, or the address for that. Sarah W. says, would you ever read the supporting PGO books, Greek Gods and Greek Heroes? Yes, you're the second person to ask that in today's stream, which is totally fine. I'm happy to answer it again. I have already done Demigod Files and Demigod Diaries. Coming up after we're done with... I want to do them kind of without spoilers, if that makes any sense. So the next two after Blood of Olympus are Camp Jupiter Classified and Camp Half-Blood Confidential. And then Sun and the Star. And then Demigods and Magicians is the crossover book, which is behind me. I'm working on it as well. And then, yes, Greek Heroes and Greek Gods. So, yes, I will hopefully do all of the Tangent books. I will not commit to doing all of the Rick Riordan Presents books because there's 15 billion of them and he didn't write them. But all of Rick Riordan's books I will hopefully finish on the channel. Mirage GSM says, maybe intentional. They made Jason a bit less relatable. No need to comment on that. Totally could be. I've always been under the impression that Rick needed an extra character and he needed to get Percy away for the first book to set up the second book. And he needed a primary protagonist, and Leo wasn't quite that, if that makes any sense. Leo wasn't the main character that he needed, so he added a new Percy. But you already have Percy, so the downside is this new character, regardless of how you write him, is going to be a little less interesting. And I just think Jason's backstory is not as enjoyable as Percy's. Sarah W. says, I find those more interesting than the actual Percy Jackson books. They are interesting. I don't know if I'd enjoy them more, me personally, but if you do, that's totally fine. There are certain stories that I really do enjoy. I really enjoyed Haley Riordan's story in Demigod Diaries, Son of Magic. But I also really hated the Diary of Luke Castellan. So, to each their own. Rachel was here, says, who's your favorite narrator in Heroes of Olympus? Good question. I love reading for Frank, but I think my favorite POV in Heroes of Olympus... First of all, I love reading for Annabeth in Mark of Athena because we've never seen her perspective before. So that's always fun for me to finally get Annabeth's perspective. But Leo is always my favorite character to read for, in terms of his chapters are always the most enjoyable for me to read. Because I always know with a Leo chapter, I'm going to enjoy it. Excuse me. Saber6 says, have you ever met any of the authors of the books you've read? If not, who would you want to meet? I haven't. Yeah, it's interesting. I've met a lot of professional athletes. I've met a lot of professional musicians, but I've never met any of the authors of these books. I'd love to meet Rick Riordan. I really would. J.K. Rowling would be an interesting meeting, I feel like. There's a lot of questions I know Harry Potter fans would ask her outside of the series. But Rick Riordan would be my go-to. George R.R. Martin, I've heard, is very, very enjoyable to meet in a professional context. People who do interviews with him, he's a very good person to interview. I think from a fan perspective, he might get a little annoyed from me if I were asking him questions of this sort of thing. But yeah, of all of these, my go-to would be Rick Riordan. Cassie Perez Carter says, are there any weird copyright things you worry about when publishing these audios? Yeah, I mean, so I've mentioned this before. What we do on this channel could be argued in court to fall under fair use copyright. The problem is not whether or not what we do is copyright legal, it's how is YouTube's copyright system going to play through the copyright complaints. Does that make any sense? So regardless of whether or not we can defend what we do in a court, YouTube's system will pull any video as soon as it is, like if someone puts in a copyright complaint to another person's video, and there is enough justification for YouTube's automatic system to pull that, there is very little that the other person can do to defend their own video, which really sucks. YouTube's system definitely favors the complainer rather than the creator. And we see that a lot with not just audiobook channels, but with, for example, if you guys are familiar with the channel Movie Flame. Movie Flame did a video about Sunrise on the Reaping that used obviously no content from the actual book because the book's not out yet. He was just talking about the series. And I think he used fan art, but also some clips from the films. And YouTube pulled it at Lionsgate's request because of the fact that the film is coming up. And there was nothing he could do about it. Like, he could not... He put in a defense against it, saying, like this is an unfair copyright complaint. I am appealing this, and they rejected the appeal. And so, yeah, the system makes copyright more aggressive than it actually is, if that makes any sense. So with any book that I put on the channel, there is always the fear that one of these authors will look at it, or one of these legal teams will look at it and pull it. With Harry Potter, that's happened to us before. That's why we lost our original channel. Whereas Lionsgate was a little kinder to us. We had 3 Hunger Games books on the channel. They only tagged one of them. Thank goodness, because that 3 could have pulled the channel as well. And so everything we put on the channel, there's always a fear that one of the authors is going to... Yeah. So it's... If you guys are ever worried about that, or if for whatever reason the channel were to ever disappear, information is always available for free, both on Vimeo and on Patreon. So even if you guys aren't paying members on Patreon, you guys have access to posts most of the time. And so if you ever want to see something of mine that has existed before that doesn't exist now on the YouTube channel, it will always be up on Vimeo or Patreon for free. Let's see here. Sarah W. says, if you ever read the 39 Clues, which branch would you most likely be in? That's a good question. I personally have never read the 39 Clues, so I can't answer that question. I know that's kind of surprising to a lot of people, but I have maybe read the first 39 Clues book, and I was probably a 4th grader, so this is 20 years ago. Not quite 20 years ago. I'm not that old. But it's been a long time since I've read them, and I honestly could not name all of the branches for you. People have requested me to do the 39 Clues books before. It's a possibility. I'm not going to commit to it now because of how many books there are, but in the future, I may start sprinkling them in eventually, and then I could answer that question honestly. Oliver Finstead says, that's the CW curse. Starts off great and then falls off. That seems to be the case for a lot of CW shows, to be honest with you. Clee says, who is your top 3 favorite couples in PJO? Number 1 is definitely Perkabeth. Second is Leo Calypso. Third one is... unconventional choice, because there's a lot I could go with. I could go with Grover and Juniper. I'm actually going to go with Chris and Clarice. That's probably not one you were expecting to hear. Sarah W. says, if you were in the Hunger Games universe, what character would you want to be? For me, it's either Snow or Finnick. Sarah W. says, which character in the Hunger Games would you like to play? Also the same, and I think it's because of the way I look. I wish I was more attractive, then I could have pulled off Snow better than, or not better than, but I really enjoyed the portrayal in the film by the actor. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. Joseph Morrill says, I didn't think that would be a yes. I'll DM you after stream asking for the P.O. box. Who's your favorite actor? My favorite actor of all time is Donald Sutherland, who played, you guys will be familiar as Snow in the Hunger Games films, the original Hunger Games films, the older version of Snow. He, in my opinion, is the greatest actor to never win an Academy Award. He is the father of Kiefer Sutherland, for those of you old enough to remember 24. He was also the star of the Academy Award-winning film from 1980 called Ordinary People. He was in the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I'm trying to think what else he would be in that maybe you've heard of. Yeah, all-time Donald Sutherland for me. There's a bunch of other names that I could list. Current actors. Really good question. I really like Helen Mirren is. I really love Helen Mirren. I love Judi Dench. Yeah, good question. There's a lengthy list, but my favorite actor of all time is Donald Sutherland. Tom Blythe, thank you. Gotta scroll up here, sorry. And that's a good thing. I enjoy when I have to scroll up in the chat. That means you guys are being active with me. Kai says, who's your favorite character generally in the Percy Jackson universe? My favorite character in general is probably Leo. Or Nico. I always say Nico, so I'll be consistent and say either Leo or Nico. Saber6 says, how are you and your family doing? I hope everyone is doing well. Good! Thank you for asking, by the way. I don't usually talk about my family on stream. Good. Yeah, my son is sick today, but that's okay. I am kind of one of those who believe that, like, you know, not that I want my kids to be sick or to eat dirt all the time, but, like, they'll get through it and they'll be stronger because of it. I'm not going to try to shelter them from getting sick or anything. So he's doing well. Wife and I are very excited about our trip. A little anxious. It's the first time we're going to be away from the kid for that long. And she's never been out of the country, so I'm really looking forward to it. Question for you guys, and I don't mean this to come across as insensitive, but with everything going on, if you guys are from the UK, with everything going on over there right now, as an American, I just hear all the bad stuff. So do you guys feel like it is safe to travel around downtowns in the UK at the moment? If you guys think it is, that would be great, and I'd love to know. I just know, like I said, my wife hears all the bad stuff, and she's a little hesitant to travel to the UK given all that's going on right now. But I've kind of assured her we're gonna avoid kind of the hot spots and go to where we plan to go. So if you guys are from the UK and want to give some insight into what's going on over there as objectively as possible, that would be wonderful. But otherwise, yeah, we're doing really well. Thank you for asking. Excuse me. Mirage GSM says, who has Frank Herbert's estate nowadays? I believe everything to do with Dune falls under his son Brian. Brian Herbert is the author of every Dune book since Chapter House. Chapter House was the last book that was written by Frank Herbert, and then his son started writing all of the other books. So all of the Dune spin-off novels are written by Brian Herbert, as well as a co-author named Kevin, whose last name, for the life of me, escapes me. But I believe the entire estate, Dune-wise, lies with Brian Herbert. Saber6 says, what Hogwarts house would you be in? I'm a Slytherin, personally. It's something to do with the ambition thing. I don't know. Yaya Aziz says, what's your favorite dystopian book series or movie? Really good question. If Hunger Games is considered dystopian, probably that. 1984 is one of my favorite books of all time. Planet of the Apes is very good. I've always wanted to like Divergent more than I do. I would probably say Hunger Games. Let's see here. Hannah Lauren Wilson says, just want to say thank you for this channel. It's been very helpful and you're stupid talented. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I will try to be humble and say I don't believe I'm stupid talented. I'm just a guy who reads books. But comments like that really, really make me feel good. So thank you very much. Sarah W. says, Donald Sutherland was also in Italian Job. Yes, that is a good shout. I forgot about that. Clee says, hope your son feels better. Thank you very much. Me too. Mirage GSM says, not from the UK, but from Germany. I think that apart from there being areas you should avoid in every country, UK should be a lot more safe than in the US at least. Yeah, I'm specifically talking about the tensions going on right now. There was a kind of a violent attack last week, 2 weeks ago in the UK, and it's caused some pretty significant racial tensions between some extremist parties and then people trying to defend themselves. And there's been some protests and some riots, and my wife and I are just trying to avoid getting caught up in any of it, if that makes any sense. Yaya Aziz says, I am and live in East London near a few friends from school. A lot of shops and businesses were closed, and one of my friend's dad was called slur walking down the street. I'm very sorry to hear that. I'm trying to word this in a way that is as kind and compassionate as possible. I don't think that should exist anywhere, personally. And I live in a very white community, and I shouldn't try to speak for anybody, but it breaks my heart hearing what's going on for a variety of sides, the different things that are going on over there, and I do apologize on behalf of you and your friends for the things that are going on in your communities over there. So, Mirage GSM says, the question about the Herbert estate was aiming at the danger of strikes from them. Yeah, I don't know about the Herbert estate. I'm not too worried about Dune at the moment. We'll see. It would more so, like, the copyright would probably come from the film studio. And I can't remember who produced the films. I can't remember who produced the Dune films. I'm more so worried about the authors that are kind of notorious for it, or at least the studios that are notorious for it right now, are Tolkien, very obviously, because of the condition of his estate, George R.R. Martin, and specifically HBO because of the show, Lionsgate for the Hunger Games, and then J.K. Rowling's, specifically American lawyers. They're a little aggressive when it comes to stuff. Kai says, have you read the Maze Runner series? I have, and I've seen all the films, and I enjoy them, and I'm currently reading the Maze Runner series, but I couldn't give you a direct date of when it's going to be out on the series. There are a lot of chapters to it. It's a lot longer book than you expect it to be. Khalees says, how do you feel about Daniel Dimer being live-action Tyson? Let me look it up and tell you what I think of that casting. Daniel, Canadian actor. I think that's he's got a unique look to him. Yeah, I think that could be done really well. It'll be interesting. So with the film, they didn't want to use the CGI budget on the single eye. So what they did is they put sunglasses on him and pretended that there was a single eye behind it. I would like to see either more CGI or just different shots that kind of make it feel like they're not avoiding using CGI for the Cyclops effect. But I think that's a very good casting choice. We'll see how his portrayal compares to how I've always imagined it. Let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, yes, politics my favorite. No, I do my best to avoid it as much as possible on this channel. I just wanted to make sure that all of you in the UK, specifically my non-white listeners, for lack of a better term, in the UK, are doing okay. Sarah W. says, would you ever read Nancy Drew? Good question. It's interesting that you bring up Nancy Drew because that's not the series that I was thinking of covering from that era, or at least from that kind of feel. I was actually considering doing the Hardy Boys, and I can't remember how the two line up date wise. But those two series, in my mind, have always been very similar because of the fact that they were around when my parents were younger, and they're kind of very similar. I'll consider it. I'll add it to the list. Let's see here. Xpogo Sam says, Patreon finance question. Interesting. Did you add a lower tier at any point since your initial launch? If so, what effect did that have? I'm looking to add a lower tier to my own account, but I'm hesitant. No. $3 is the lowest tier that I can have on Patreon where I am still making a profit. Because Patreon does tax you, like pre-tax you on their behalf. So it is the lowest that I can go that I'm still making money. YouTube is $5 if your channel is monetized. Our channel currently isn't monetized, but YouTube's like baseline for in America at least is $5. And I think the $3 helps quite a bit because it is more approachable than $5, if that makes any sense. Like, I think of $5 and it's like, all right, I can give away a $5 bill, but I don't want to do it all the time. Whereas $3 being less than that, it's like, okay, I can give $3 a month for that. That's pocket change if I'm doing it once a month. I think it, granted, we have the numbers we do, which I'm very thankful for. And I always want to stress that I don't do this for the money. I would continue doing this if we weren't getting paid, if I wasn't making money off of Patreon. It just helps me to justify being away from my family for 4 to 5 hours a night, if that makes any sense. I would suggest doing it. I will say this, though. The economy is always changing. And, depending on the direction that this election cycle goes, certain things are going to be maybe cheaper than they were before, and some things may be more expensive than they were before. So it's always a balance of how the economy is doing. I think in about a year, I will have to eliminate my $3 tier because I think Patreon's going to raise their prices. And I think I am going to need, if I want to continue to use Patreon as an income, I think I will need to raise that lowest bar to justify getting paid there. Does that make any sense? So I would suggest it, yes, short term, but long term, I think you might want to stick to that $5 tier or whatever your lowest is. Mirage GSM says, do film studios have the right to call strikes for using the books? Not specifically. It's confusing. It's very confusing because of the fact that we don't necessarily, but a lot of channels use stills. Like a lot of audiobook channels use stills from the films as backgrounds, but it is also content that is found in the films. So can they legally do it? Not specifically. Can they do it on YouTube and get away with it because of the algorithm? Yes, is the answer I'll give. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but that is my understanding of it. Xpogo Sam, because it can convert free members upward, but it could also convert higher members down. If you've had this experience, curious to know what results you've seen. I will say I see a lot of people jump down from my $5 tier to my $3 tier. And I don't see a lot of people move up. So I think if you add the lower tier, you're going to see a lot of people drop down. People want the bare minimum. So what you could do is, and I don't do this, I try to give everybody everything at the lowest value. But what you could do is offer different incentives. So you could change your incentive program that people get certain things that you're offering at your $5 tier at the $3 tier. But in order to continue getting all of the access that they want, then they have to stay at the $5 tier, if that makes any sense. Sarah W. says, what did you think of Teresa from Maze Runner? I didn't like how she betrayed everyone even after knowing the truth. I think, okay, so here's my problem. I really didn't like her portrayal in the film. And I watched the film before I read the books. And so I was kind of tainted to that. I don't know what it was about the portrayal, but I just wasn't a fan. And I think that tainted my opinion on the character. Reading the book again, I think I like her significantly more. And I think her actions are more justified, if that makes any sense. I went into it biased, if that makes any sense. Saber6 says, what kind of book and movie genres do you like most? I'm a big drama person, so, like, I love how, like, okay, so I have some questions about House of the Dragon coming up, and I'll maybe double on them. But House of the Dragon Season 2 got a lot of criticism because it is so slow and drawn out. That's what I love action scenes. I thought the action scenes looked very good. But I don't watch Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon for the battles. I watch it for the political intrigue and for the individual conversation pieces. So, like, me writing my book, like me writing Radiation Effect now compared to where it was 10 years ago, it was a lot more action. It was a lot more, like, things happen. Whereas now it's more an introspection on each of these characters, if that makes any sense. So I am definitely one for, like, slow-paced drama. So I mentioned those two. I'm trying to think other, like, I love The Crown. Crown is more of a period piece, but it's definitely introspective drama. I really enjoyed The Bear. The Bear. Sorry, actually, the one I was thinking of was, I really enjoyed Baby Reindeer. It's a bit dark. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. It's pretty dark. A lot of triggering stuff in that show, but it is a character introspection. And I definitely preferred those over anything else. Let's see here. Sarah W says, how do channels get monetized? Do you have to reach a certain amount of subscribers? Yes, you need 1,000 subscribers to get monetized on YouTube. Our old channel was monetized, and part of the issue with getting a new channel is because our content has been on YouTube before. The reason we're not monetized at the moment is because YouTube keeps rejecting us with its automatic system because that we're using reused content, if that makes any sense. Even though this is very clearly me, I'm the voice that you hear in every audiobook. This is me on the channel, Echo Wirm Audiobooks. My name's Ty. I'm the voice you hear. I'm the one who kind of runs the channel. But because we have content that has been used elsewhere before, YouTube is disqualifying us. So, yeah, just 1,000 subscribers is the benchmark. And then you might be monetized for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden YouTube decides that you don't have original content, and then you have to appeal to it. We've done that before, and it's succeeded, and we've also done it, and it's failed. So it's hit or miss. Eminem Weekly and Shamara Plays say hello. Thank you guys for being here. Eminem Weekly says, what is your favorite book in the Artemis Fowl series? Good question. I've only read the first 2. I would say Arctic Incident because I've only read the first 2. I'm intending on reading more for the channel, but I have only ever read the first 2, so I'm going to go with Arctic Incident. Oliver Finstead says, do you have any plans on doing any horror or thriller books in the future? Yes. I'm currently reading House of Cards, which is a political thriller. In terms of horror, I would like to get to the Cthulhu mythos eventually, which is H.P. Lovecraft. There is a book that is currently over on Patreon and will be out on the channel at Halloween called Malishon Manor. That is written by a local artist from where I'm from, who did a bunch of short stories, a lot of horror short stories. So that should be coming up. If you guys are on Patreon, that is already up. But yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that I would like to do. I've done Sherlock Holmes. I'd like to do a little more mystery stuff too. Agatha Christie as well. But definitely horror. I'm a big horror fan. Apart from drama, horror is probably one of my favorite things. Shamara Plays says, do you think you'll ever read Trials of Apollo? Yes. I mentioned this earlier in the live stream. We will do Trials of Apollo after we do Kane Chronicles. So 4 books away, and then we will start with Hidden Oracle is the first book. Saber6 says, do you think it's better to watch a movie version or read the book version of a story first? I used to always say book first. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think one of the benefits of watching the film first is it allows you to visualize characters better. If you're not a person who thinks visually, then maybe sometimes reading or world building is not as easy for you. It's easier for you to visualize once you've actually seen it and you know what to expect, and then you can better enjoy the book because it expands on the things that you saw in the film. I think most of the time books are always better than the films, or at least more expansive than the films, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to watch a film first, as long as you know then when you're reading the book what to look for and what to see has changed, if that makes any sense. I personally prefer to read the book, but I also like to then go back to the book after I've watched the film. Joseph Morrill says, I'm telling you, Echo, since you like drama, read Stephen King's 11/22/63. It is on my list, I promise. Kai says, who's your favorite god/goddess in Percy Jackson? Mine is Nike, personally. Sarah W. says, what is the Artemis Fowl series about? Good question. So Artemis Fowl is a kid. I want to say he's 12, but I could get that age wrong. He is a preteen kid who is a super genius who comes from a very, very rich family in Ireland. His father disappears, and it is his job to protect the family fortune. And so his role in doing this is discovering that fairies are real, which might throw a lot of people off, and stealing their fortune. So the first book is about Artemis Fowl discovering that fairies are real, that gnomes exist, that leprechauns exist, whatever, that there's a magic world underneath the earth. And his whole plan is he's going to scam them out of a lot of money. So it's basically a crime thriller, but written from the perspective of a preteen who lives in a world where magic is secretly real. Saber6 kind of asked the same thing. Is the Artemis Fowl series connected with Percy Jackson? Not at all. Very different author. Owen Colfer is an Irish author. Yeah, that same question. What is this series about? Oliver Finstead says, yes, I love Lovecraft. Me too. Sarah W. says, I prefer watching the movies first and then reading the book because then you're not disappointed if anything is left out. Yes, very true. Shamara Play says, what is your favorite book? My favorite book, I've been given this answer for the last year or so. I'll say it's probably the same. My favorite book is Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. It's the third book in the Game of Thrones series. Feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. I believe I'm caught up with the chat at the moment. Let's go to a pre-prepared question from Laboom Edits, who says, can you post the second Harry Potter book again? Shayra Salsa also says, where are the Harry Potter audiobooks? So I mentioned the copyright issue earlier. J.K. Rowling, her legal team is one of those, they're notorious for cracking down on YouTube channels. And so we have all of our recordings for free. I'm going to stress they are available for free. You don't need to sign up for anything over on Patreon and Vimeo. Vimeo is similar to YouTube. It's just a video sharing service. Their copyright is a bit different, thank goodness, than YouTube's is, and it's also not as popular a site. Patreon is Patreon, but I have everything available for free, Harry Potter-wise, including, well, actually not yet, but in a few weeks' time, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child will be out over on Patreon and Vimeo for free. Mirage GSM says, probably depends on the quality of the movie. I would hate to be spoiled on a book story by a movie I didn't like. I don't disagree. See, I will say, so this isn't a movie, this is a TV show, but Game of Thrones, back when it was, good, or even House of the Dragon now, makes me want to read Game of Thrones so that I can better expand upon the world, if that makes any sense. Like, I love Fire and Blood more because I've watched House of the Dragon, even though it's slightly different. Saber6 says, I like when a book series has good fan art, so I can better visualize the characters. It would be cool to see fan art of the radiation effect. I would, but I'm not good at art. I'm not either. If any of you are interested in doing some fan art for the radiation effect, feel free to do so. I would love to see what you guys have, and I would love to share it on the channel if that's something that you guys are interested in. Eminem Weekly says, aside from the Artemis Fowl series, have you ever read any other Owen Colfer novels? If not, I'd love to recommend some for you. I haven't. I have never read beyond the Artemis Fowl series of Owen Colfer. If you have recommendations, feel free to leave them. Yaya Aziz says, what were you most dissatisfied with The Cursed Child? everyone always says the Voldemort kid stuff, the Harry relationship with his son stuff. Me personally, it was the tone. The tone is so all over the place. The Cursed Child is such a dark story, but it tries to lighten itself by overusing comedy, and the comedy is not very good. I mentioned it last live stream. There's a scene in Act 2 where Albus and Severus, or Albus and Scorpius go back to the first task of the from Goblet of Fire, and the whole scene, they are basically just doing cheers with the crowd. Very little of the dialogue has to do with the event, and it has to do with them just like being a part of the school and the crowd and doing these dumb little cheers. And the tone is so different from Harry Potter and also the rest of the play that it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you have the big reveal of who the villain is in, I want to say, Act 3 scene 19 or 20, and then the scene right after that is a comedy scene. And it's like this, it's all over the place. And I get that theater is sometimes like that, like a palate cleansing scene, but the tonal shift in Cursed Child is terrible. And so it just, the pacing is terrible, in my opinion. Shamaro Play says, do you think you'll ever read the Michael Vey series? I am unfamiliar with the Michael Vey series. I will check it out. Emily Darling says, who is your favorite Percy Jackson character and who is your least favorite? If we're talking the original series, my favorite character, well, regardless of the series, is probably Nico D'Angelo. And my least favorite character... Oh, man, that's a good question. My least favorite character... I don't know if I have one in the original series. In the sequel series, it's probably Octavian. For a couple of different reasons. I felt like Octavian was annoying, which is good because he's meant to be annoying, but I felt like there was more that could have been given to Octavian. He just kind of serves as a secondary villain, and I don't know that we get enough of him, if that makes any sense, to justify his annoyance. Joy Decker says, I love your Percy Jackson audiobooks and Heroes of Olympus. Thank you very much, Joy. Joseph Morrow says, man, Cursed Child could have been so much better. Echo, I'll ask again because I know I've asked, have you listened to Epic the Musical yet? Thunder Saga just released. I haven't. It's on my list, and I promise I will check it out eventually. But I have a lot going on right now. I apologize. Let's go to a question from Cantu Short, who says, do you think you could start the Silver Chair? The Silver Chair will start on the channel as soon as we're done with Dune. So I think Dune has something like 50 chapters. So Silver Chair should start sometime in September. It is already done, up and done over on Patreon, but it will hit the channel after Dune. Kai says, since Nico is one of your favorites, do you enjoy Nico's chapters in Blood of Olympus? I do. I will say I don't enjoy the plot of his chapters very much. I know that Rick needed to kind of space out the plot over in Europe, and that's why we have all of those chapters intercut with the Reina Nico stuff. In my opinion, I think the Reina Nico stuff kind of kills the pace of the European stuff. It's very heavy, which is good. It's a lot of character drama. Like I said, I like that. But it's all, for me, I'm reading a Leo chapter and I'm really enjoying myself. And I get done with the 4 sets of Leo chapters and all of a sudden, now I have to slow down and I have to go back to Nico and Reina and I just don't want to do that right now. So I enjoy them, but I don't enjoy the plot necessarily. Let's see. E-Money Darling says, I'm about to start part 1 of Blood of Olympus. Perfect. Blood of Olympus is very good. Starts a little odd. I had a question from someone about that coming up. Okay, that's fair. I liked him in the beginning, and then he got annoying. That's fair. I, for the life of me, can't remember who we were talking about. Oh, Octavian. Yes. Mirage says, what about Messiah and Children of Dune? Not entirely sure what you're asking there. If you want to clarify what you mean specifically by that question. Question from AC Sifia, who says, why does the Philosopher's Stone cover look different than the other ones? Good question. So how I recorded the Harry Potter series is Harry Potter was sorry, I do apologize. Harry Potter was the first series that I read for the channel. So I read Sorcerer's Stone first, and then I read all the way through. By the time I got done with the series, my style of recording, like my narrative ability had changed so much and improved so much from where I started that I decided to redo the first book. And I'd never read the British version before, and so I decided to read the British version. So Philosopher's Stone over on Patreon and Vimeo is the British version, and it is my re-recording of the first book. So you'll still find Sorcerer's Stone on there somewhere if you really want to listen to me not knowing how to record audiobooks. Yeah, Philosopher's Stone, that's why the cover is different. It's the British cover. It's the original version cover rather than the American cover. Mirage says, when you're doing the sequels, or if. Yeah, I will definitely do Dune Messiah. I haven't decided if I'll do Children of Dune yet. I really enjoy the fourth one, God Emperor. It's definitely not one that I think you guys would enjoy. It's a weird book. It's a really weird book. He turns into a worm. But yeah, Dune Messiah is one, especially, so I'll record it and I'll probably wait to see if they do intend on making a third Dune film. And then I'll probably release it around the time that the third Dune film comes out. If they do plan on doing that. Shamara Plays says, who is your favorite of the 7 demigods? Me, like, Percy probably, but I really like Leo and I really like Frank. And I like Hazel too. And Annabeth. And I tolerate Jason and Piper. Let's go to a question from Tiffany Rockward, who says, where can I find the downloadable audiobooks for this collection? Good question. This is another Patreon-based question. One thing that is available to my patrons by request is at the $3 tier. If you guys just DM me over on Patreon, I will send you a link to the Google Drive, which has just downloadable versions of all the audiobooks. They're not videos. They're just like downloadable files that you can have on your phone. So you can listen to it all the way through. I have every Percy Jackson book, Heroes of Olympus book, Harry Potter book, not split into 2 parts. It's all just one all the way through, even if it goes more than 10 hours. And you can play them offline, which is really great. I know a lot of people want that and don't have the ability to do that. So if you guys want that, that is available for my $3 a month tier and above by request over on Patreon. So just DM me and ask for it. Awesome 800 says, I've been in bed all day, but your stream finally got me out of bed. So hello. Well, I'm glad to be able to do that for you. Eminem Weekly says, here are some Owen Colfer novels you should be reading in your list. The Warp Trilogy, excuse me, which is an action steampunk thriller. I think I'd enjoy that. The second is The Supernaturalist, a supernatural thriller. I will definitely have to check that out. Xpogo Sam says, how much would it cost on Cameo for you to narrate a Where's Waldo book? That's a really good question. I haven't read a Where's Waldo book in like 15 years, and I can't remember if they even have words. But if you... So I think my Cameo is either $10 or $15. I started a Cameo page. So if you guys go to cameo.com and look for Echo Worm, you should find me. Cameo, if you guys are unaware, is you can basically find your favorite creators or actors or athletes or whatever, and you can pay them a minimum amount and they'll send you like a little video of something. So if you guys want me to wish you guys happy birthday on camera, like a personalized video message, or if you guys want me to, like Xpogo Sam says, read a Where's Waldo book for you, I think my minimum is either $10 or $15. I would do it at the minimum price. I don't know how good it would be, but if that's something you're interested in, feel free to do so. That is over on Cameo. Just look for Echo Worm over on cameo.com. I also wanted to mention my merchandise. there are a bunch of links down below. I should have added the Cameo link, and I might add that in post so we have it for our next live stream. But if you guys want merchandise from the channel, this is my most famous blunder from Sea of Monsters. I ate at the kitchen table. It's in the Percy Jackson font, and it's got the little trident underneath. My wife made that. So if you guys are interested in supporting the channel, t-shirts are as little as $20, and then it goes all the way up, I think $35 for either a hoodie or a sweatshirt. I can't remember what the different price ranges are, but that is available over on Bonfire with the link down below. Shamaro Plays says, what is your schedule for reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid? Good question. Kind of just whenever people request it. So you're the first person to request the next book. I will try to get it out by the end of September. It usually doesn't take me too long to record. They're about 250 pages, so I can usually get through it in a week or so, in addition to all the normal stuff. My immediate non-daily chapter schedule, like I'm trying to get done with Among the Barons, which is the 4th book in the Shadow Children sequence, and I'm also trying to get through a series of unfortunate events, the first one. And so, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I'm hoping to have to you by the end of September. Xpogo Sam says, it was a joke 100%. They have no words, but there is a transcript for it that's just Waldo on repeat until it says, not Waldo. That's pretty good. I'd be willing to do just kind of my version of it if that's something you're interested in. But you do got to pay me on Cameo. Let's go to a question from Black Dove, or Blackheart Dove Emoji, whose name I never know how to pronounce, on Patreon, says, is it just me, or is Blood of Olympus moving at a way faster pace than the others? Yeah, so I think part of that is we have less POVs, which really helps, and there's a lot less that happens. Significantly fewer chapters than House of Hades. So what happens with that is you get 4 chapters in Europe, and then 4 chapters back in the States, and then 4 chapters in Europe, and 4 chapters back in the States, and it bounces back and forth, and it makes it feel like things are progressing a lot better, or a lot faster, rather. And it's mostly down to we have less character POVs. So, yeah, it's definitely, you're not the first person to notice that. A lot of people have noticed that, but I think it's better. Like, House of Hades is great, but it's very long, and it has a lot of very short chapters, which kind of kill the pacing. Oliver Finstead says, so on Cameo, I can ask you to read a chapter of Percy Jackson in Norwegian. Yeah, I could probably do that. Yeah. There is very... Okay, so I say this cautiously. Cameo, I will do pretty much... Or I can do pretty much any request. I don't typically like swearing on camera, so that's something I'll probably say no to. Blaspheming on camera is not typically something that I'm okay with, or just generally embarrassing myself, but everything else is kind of fair game. So if there's something you guys want me to say over on Cameo, you are more than welcome to. Cameo is fantastic. For those of you on Patreon, you saw that Patrick Fabian gave us a shout out from Better Call Saul. That should be coming up on the channel. It's like the start of the chapter 18 of Blood of Olympus. He gave a little shout out to Echo Wirm, so I was able to do that over on Cameo, and if you guys want me to do something, then feel free to do so. Mirage GSM says, I think Where's Waldo is more or less a picture book where you have to search for the character in the picture. I've not actually seen one directly, though. Yes, it is. It is literally an I Spy book with a single character. It's originally a British book. It's called Where's Wally? In America, it's called Where's Waldo? But it is literally a find this character book. I don't believe there are any words in the entire book. But yes, if you guys really wanted me to do so, feel free to request it over on Cameo. Shamaro Plays says, do you think you'll ever read any Goosebumps books? Yes, they have been requested before, and they are on my list. I would love to do a couple of them. I grew up with so I was a little young for the old Goosebumps show, right? That came out a little before I was born, kind of into my young childhood. But I really enjoyed R.L. Stine's Haunting Hour. That came out when I was about 10 years old. Very good show, kind of a modern version of Goosebumps. And I would love to do some of his older books there. Eminem Weekly says, one more Owen Colfer recommendation. It's a modern-day Southern fantasy novel called Hi-Fire. Southern Fantasy. I don't know specifically what that genre means, but I will definitely check it out. Let's go to a question from Jay Davis, excuse me, who says, didn't Annabeth grow up in Richmond? Yes. So this is... I do like daily trivia questions on the channel, right? Typically around noon Eastern. And one that I did a couple days ago that I actually deleted because a lot of people were mad at me. I asked, I think the question was, where did Annabeth grow up before Camp Half-Blood? And I think my options that I put were San Francisco, Washington, I don't know what the other one was, Chicago, or Boston. And the correct answer with those options is Boston. Like, Annabeth was born in Boston and spent a few years of her life in Boston. Technically, yes, she did spend most of her childhood prior to Camp Half-Blood in Richmond, Virginia. So it was a trick question because Richmond wasn't one of the options, but she also did grow up in Boston. So the correct answer is Boston. For those of you that have read the series, might be confused because her family does currently live in San Francisco, and she currently lives in New York. So a lot of people were not happy about the fact that I didn't include Richmond, and they were confused because, yes, Annabeth did in fact grow up in Richmond, Virginia, but she spent the first few years of her life in Boston. Saber6 says, how many books are on your list to read? If you include individual books and not just series, it is upwards of 1,000, upwards of 100. We could probably go the next 10 years without getting another request on the channel. But I am prioritizing the ones with more requests than anything. So obviously you guys see my book list behind me. I'm assuming we could probably get through all of the books behind me by the end of next year. So I think all of these books behind me we could probably have on the channel by December of 2025. Which seems like a long way away, but there's a lot of pages in these books and a lot of chapters in them. Sarah W says, would you ever read the Fear Street books by R.L. Stine? I loved Goosebumps and The Haunting Hour. Yeah, I probably would. I don't want to like oversaturate the channel with horror, but we currently don't have any horror, so yeah, I'll add Goosebumps to my list behind me and see if we can get through them and get people engaged with them on the channel. I don't know how R.L. Stine typically is with copyright on YouTube, but I'll look into it. Let's see here. Eminem Weekly says, have you ever seen the Goosebumps movie with Jack Black as R.L. Stine? It's one of my favorite horror films. It came out, so I think that movie came out right after I had kind of switched into more young adult to adult fiction, if that makes any sense. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that movie came out right as I was moving into high school, which is also around the time that I started kind of falling out of the Rick Riordan stuff. So I have not seen it, to kind of short answer. Sarah W says, were you born in 2000 like me? We seem to be around the same age as we read certain books and watch certain shows. I'm a couple years older than you. I won't spoil anything, but yes, we are about the same age. Let's go to a question from... I have about a page left. Oh. No, I have quite a few questions left, actually, which is a good thing, maybe. Fluffy Pony Equestrian says, what did Artemis and Apollo do to piss off Zeus? Good question. So there's a kind of a throwaway line at the end of chapter 4 of Blood of Olympus where... who are they talking? Is it Hera that they're talking to? Says, like, Artemis and Apollo will be looking for a way back in or a way to make amends or something like that. And it's never like explicitly stated. I think it's like chapter 30 or so, somewhere around there, where Leo is talking to Apollo and he kind of mentions that it's due to their interference, with the giants. Like Zeus is a little ticked about Octavian and his role that he's playing. But I don't know if it's explicitly ever stated why Zeus is so mad at them. Zeus is kind of mad at everybody, but that's kind of a trend. So that's kind of the short answer. We don't exactly know, but it's hinted that Apollo, something to do with Apollo not having a different form between Greek and Roman, in comparison to the others, and the fact that Octavian is really pissing a lot of people off. Happy3553 says, what happened in Albania? Good question. This is another throwaway line in chapter 5, I think. So Reyna and Nico and Coach Hedge are heading west from Greece? Italy? I can't remember where I think it's Greece. Yeah, it's Epirus. They're heading west after House of Hades. And they mention that something happened in Albania that none of them want to talk about because it's too embarrassing. And the answer to your question, what happened in Albania, is we don't know. It is never revealed. It is kind of an inside joke. There are like Reddit threads dedicated to the answer of that question, wiki like speculations, but we are never actually given an answer to what happened in Albania. I don't think they'll ever tell us. I think Rick was trying to both throw a joke in there and also maybe imply that something more inappropriate than he is allowed to talk about in a teen book happens in Albania. But neither character ever wants to talk about it. Neither character does. Nico mentions it in Trials of Apollo as well. But he's like, I don't want to talk about Albania. So it's kind of a throwaway line, but it's implied that something happened there that they're either very embarrassed or like too traumatized by something to talk about. It's not entirely sure what the tone is with that, but it is just kind of a running joke, and we never find out the answer. Mirage GSM says, have you had a chance to look at the 1632 series? I'm not sure it would be suitable for your channel. I haven't. It is on my list of things to check out. But yeah, it is on my, like, I have a list of books that I have checked out and I'm going to read. And then I also have a list of things that you guys have suggested that I have yet to check out. And that's one of them that I have yet to check out. So I do apologize for how slow I'm moving on that. Mirage GSM says, the author Eric Flint seems to have a similar policy as Rick Riordan regarding author-approved fan fiction. Interesting. I will check it out. When you say not suitable for your channel, keep in mind I'm also reading Game of Thrones. So we'll see. Shamaro Plays says, I think I know why he's mad at Apollo. I don't want to spoil it, though. Mirage GSM says, Albania seems to be a noodle incident. Yeah. Yeah. The speculation, at least with the Reddit threads and on the wiki page, has always been that, like, not necessarily something sexual happened, but, like, I don't know if Nico's clothes got ripped off, or it's implied to just be like, inappropriate, and they don't want to discuss it again because it happened there and we're done with it, that sort of thing. Awesome 800 says, what is your opinion on book talk books? So I'm going to date myself here. I'm going to age myself. I have never had TikTok, and I probably never will. I am aware of book talk. I am not very familiar with book talk. So any form of content that gets people engaged and inspires them to find mediums that I don't know what I'm trying to get at here, but I'm not necessarily opposed to, I don't know if I have a strict opinion on book talk books. I think I'm more worried about people's attention spans than anything. Tukmanan says, I'm just sneaking a pure compliment. I love your different voices that you use. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate just kind of hearing compliments sometimes. There are some days, maybe you guys are creators and you feel this too, in your comment sections. There are some days that I will get a whole lot of positive comments and it's a very good day for me. And then, like, I don't typically take criticism negatively. Like, I don't usually get bothered by too much criticism. Oftentimes, like, if it's something that I just don't want to look at, I'll just delete it, whatever. But, like, some days, a couple days ago, I had a day where, like, every single comment was either critical or negative. And it just kind of, like, it doesn't bother me, but the fact that every single thing I saw that day was just like, oh, you do this wrong, or this, or whatever. Or, you know, it's nice to hear compliments once in a while is what I'm getting at here. Sarah W. says, what are some of your favorite Goosebumps and Haunting Hour episodes? My favorite Goosebumps episode is the one where the girl gets like a brick gets thrown through her house and she gets new neighbors and she thinks they're ghosts, but it turns out that the mom is just deaf and they don't have electricity, and then she finds out that she's a ghost. That's my favorite Goosebumps episode. And then my favorite Haunting Hour episodes, there are two of them that really come to mind. One of them is Mascot, and the other one is the one, I think Bailey Madison is in it. She's in a lot of them, actually. But it's the one where people just start disappearing, and then everybody starts turning into scarecrows. I love, like, those 2 episodes are the ones that stick in my mind. There are a couple other ones, but I really enjoy those ones. M&M Weekly says, I never knew that the Radiation Effect novel was yours. Congrats. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but we're about an hour removed from that now. The Radiation Effect is a book that I am currently and actively writing, so I think the first 12 chapters are up on the channel if you guys want to check it out in the folder. Mirage GSM says, with not suitable, I meant that most of your titles are pretty famous titles, and 1632 is probably more niche. I'm not opposed to that. I've mentioned this on Discord before. If you guys have stories that you guys would want me to read that you have written, and I think that it's something that the channel, like people on the channel would engage with, I'd be happy to do it. I mentioned I just recorded a book by a local author of mine, like from the same town as me, and it's coming up on Halloween. He is not very well known by any means, and my goal is to expose his stuff to a larger audience. I mean, we have 7,000 people who are subscribed to this channel, so I'm not opposed to promoting smaller authors. The big thing for me is just the schedule. I have a lot of people who want me to finish Percy Jackson, and I'm doing my best to finish that while also sneaking in a whole bunch of other stuff that you guys want me to read. So let's see here. No need to apologize. I know you have a long list and no obligation to rush through it on our account. Well, I appreciate you guys being respectful of my time, for lack of a better term. Shimaro Plays says, do you think you'll ever read the Daniel X series? I'm unfamiliar with it. I'll check it out. Dinky Kaminari says, I have no idea how you get criticism. You're the best audiobook creator ever. I love your voice and you do all the acting of characters. Great. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's usually my accent. People criticize the way that I pronounce words. The most common one, which you guys can give me insight into this. I get comments all the time saying it's pronounced vague instead of Vogue. Like people will spell it out and say it's pronounced vague, not Vogue. And I don't think I've ever said Vogue by any means. I think I say vague. Like I don't extend the A. I don't say vague, but I say vague. The other one that I typically use, especially when I use British accents, is I say Voss and Dias instead of Vase and Deus. Other ones I'm trying to think. People have criticized my accents before. I'm not really bothered by that necessarily, but it's the... Or one I had the other day was, someone goes, this was a perfect recording, but you pronounce wind wrong. Like W-H-I-N-E-D. And I go, how do you pronounce wind wrong? And then I thought about it and I was like, did I say whinnied? As in like a horse whinnied? So there are just comments like that that really confuse me, and maybe I just get caught up thinking about them all day. But anyways. Saber6 says, it's weird to me that you have so many subscribers and fans, but I don't see too many likes and views on the day-to-day chapters. Yeah, I mean, so for example, it usually takes a few days. So the daily chapters of Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus, if you give it 3 days, it'll usually have 500 views. Some of my more popular videos, or like at the beginning of each book, like the first chapter of each Percy Jackson book, typically gets around 5,000 views by the time I take it down. That doesn't bother me necessarily. I'm more so just like, I want to see the channel progress in a linear way. Like I don't enjoy the peaks and valleys. So sometimes we get really just like dead weeks, and then sometimes we get really positive weeks. And I also really enjoy getting comments from you guys. So like my enjoyment as a channel creator comes not from getting more subscribers or more likes necessarily, but comes from hearing your guys' feedback or just little comments that you have or questions that you guys have. Yeah. Let's see here. Mirage GSM says, I would probably pronounce it like neither. I think I's pronounced... I think it's pronounced the A like the letter. Vague? Yeah, so the problem with me is my accent, like, if I say vague, I have short V's, and it almost sounds like I'm saying the F slur. and I don't want to do that. So I typically shorten the A and I say Vag, which when I'm doing my Canadian accent for Frank, I say Vag, which probably comes off... Anyways, not a big deal. Just a question that I was curious. Yeah, I have a pretty significant northern Midwestern accent that I try to pacify when I'm reading, except, like I said, for Frank. But I decided not to go with the East Coast accent for Percy and Annabeth. I thought that might get a little too annoying. Even though, by all means, Annabeth should have a Boston accent. Rachel was here, says, just saying, I love your accent you add to Frank. Thank you very much. I had a question about that, actually. Someone goes, JC Jane Fan Club says, why didn't you use a Chinese accent for Frank? Which is a fair question. Because I used kind of a, for lack of a better term, and maybe this is inappropriate of me to say, but I used kind of a stereotypical Chinese accent for his grandmother. The reason I did that, and not for Frank, is Frank is several generations removed from China. His grandmother is, I believe, only 2. And his grandmother is also obsessed with Chinese mythology. So it would make sense to me that she would keep her family's accent. I did the same thing for Hazel's mother. Hazel's mother has a pretty significant French Bayou accent, which I've also been criticized for. And I don't mean it to be a race thing by any means. Another voice I get criticized for a lot of the time is Tyson's voice. And I did that on purpose and not for a negative way. I've mentioned before, like, the reason I do Tyson's voice the way I do is because Tyson's whole character arc is people think he's dumber than he is. Like, Tyson does not come across as an intelligent character, but the people that grow to know him grow to respect him and the way that he is. And so I wanted to get that across in his voice. So if it comes across as insensitive, I do apologize. But the reason I didn't do Frank as a Chinese accent is because he grew up in Vancouver. He didn't grow up with the Chinese influence that his grandmother did, if that makes any sense. Mirage GSM says, like in bagel. Yes. So I say bagel. I know some people say bagel. But yeah, I shorten it. It's a short A for me. Like a lowercase a, not a strong A. But my natural accent, I do say flag instead of flag. So I don't know. You pick and choose. Easton Reese Smith says, are you planning on continuing the radiation effect soon? Yes. I mentioned earlier in the stream, the chapter, I think 13, has taken me a significant amount of time. And the reason for that is I'm trying to progress the timeline while not kill or changing the pace. So very little happens in a very long period of time in chapter 13. And so I've been trying to balance that. But I've also been writing chapter 14 at the same time because chapter 14 is a significant plot-heavy chapter. It's a very short chapter, but a very significant event happens in chapter 14. And so I've kind of been co-writing them together. So I'm hoping to have that up for you guys in the next week or two. Kyle O'Farrell says, I thought you were British when I first found your Harry Potter books. Thank you. That's a genuine, like, that makes me happy. I don't know if many people, especially if a lot of British people were convinced by my accent, but I am very happy that some people believed it. That was my goal. I'm gonna try my accent when I go over to England next week and see how well I do. We'll see. It'll be interesting. Denki Kaminari says, will you be doing all of the other Rick Riordan books like Magnus Chase and Trials of Apollo? Yes. After Blood of Olympus, we'll do Kane Chronicles, and then we'll do Trials of Apollo, and then we'll do Magnus Chase to close it out. Let's go to a question from Farley Cakes, who says, what are your next few books coming up that aren't daily chapter books? Good question. So I'm going to try to finish Among the Barons and get that to you guys sometime in the next couple of weeks. I'm also currently working on another Margaret Peterson Haddock's book in a separate series called Found. I lost you for a second. I do apologize. I don't know if that was my Wi-Fi or what happened. Let me know if you guys called Gathering Blue. Some more short stories by that local author I mentioned earlier. The final of the Star Wars Jedi Prince series, Fablehaven, Aragon, City of Ember, some more Book of Mormon stuff. Artemis Fowl 2, The Arctic Incident, Hunger Games, which will be a daily chapter video actually. More Sherlock Holmes, Sun and the Star, a wrestling book that I've mentioned before, Divergent, Maze Runner, House of Cards, and Dune Messiah are all behind me. And then I'm going to keep plugging away at some children's books, A to Z Mysteries, Magic Treehouse, that sort of thing. Awesome 800 says, whoa, did anybody else get a huge lag spike? Yeah, I think my Wi-Fi died for a second there, but as long as I'm back... YouTube is not receiving enough to maintain. I do apologize, everybody. Give me 1 sec. I am going to try to solve it real quick. If you give me 5 minutes, I will be right back. Okay, I think I have it solved. I'm so sorry for that, everybody. We should have it fixed now. Let me know if you're still having trouble. Mirage says, phonetic writing would be vague. It sure is hard to talk about pronunciation in English. Yes, and it all depends on the accent, like I said. So the reason that I do the short A, like I mentioned, is because I also... my F's and V's are very close to each other, and I don't want it to sound like I'm doing something else, because I don't mean to. Excuse me. Let's go to a question from... or comment from Shamaro Plays says, hey, Echo, I love what you do. I'm blind, and your readings are phenomenal. Well, thank you very much. One of the reasons that I started this channel is to make books that I love very much accessible to people who are visually impaired or have reading difficulties, whether it be attention deficit disorder or ADHD or dyslexia, or maybe you just don't have time to read, which was the case with me for the longest time. I stopped reading from about the time I was 14 to the time I was maybe 19. And I got back into reading through audiobooks, and I wanted to then share that for other people in a way that is accessible to a greater majority, where you guys don't have to pay $20 through a paywall to get things that you should have access to for a lot cheaper than that. So that's why I do what I do, and I'm happy to hear comments like that. So thank you very much, Shamaro. Denki Kaminari says, what is your favorite Percy Jackson / Heroes of Olympus character? I would say either Leo or Nico. Denki Kaminari says, what is your favorite one to voice? For me, it's Frank. Sarah W. says, I'd love for you to read the Westing game and the Boxcar Children's series as well. You're not the first person to suggest that, so I will bump that up in my list. Rachel was here, says, I could never do an audiobook. I always have reactions to characters' lines / deaths. Usually I've read these books before, so I know what's coming. There are some that will shock me, and what I do is I pause, go back a paragraph, and then I crop it. So it's not always a continuous live reading, thank goodness. Someone asked me one time how I could sit down and read Percy Jackson for 8 hours straight. I don't. I typically read it for an hour at a time and then crop it all together. I will say, when I do when I do Wrath of the Triple Goddess, the upcoming Percy Jackson book, it's going to be it's going to be pretty much constant through. I'm going to show up at my Barnes & Noble that morning, grab the book, which I've already paid for, and I'm going to run home and I'm going to lock myself in my studio until I'm done. And then I am going to give it to my patrons, and then a few days later I will give it to the channel. Joseph Morrill says, I heard cameo earlier in the stream. Is there a limit of what you will read off? Just curious where you will draw the line. So on a minute-long video, it's like $15. I'll probably up the price based on time. So if people want me to read a full chapter, it depends how long it'll take. I did mention there are certain things that I'm not comfortable doing on camera. I mentioned swearing as one of them, or specifically embarrassing myself on camera. That's pretty common for most people on Cameo. But otherwise, I'm pretty open. So if there's something like Cameo, usually it's birthday messages or just like teasing your friends with one of their favorite celebrities. I would not consider myself a celebrity by any means, but if you guys want the voice of Percy Jackson to read you something as Percy Jackson, I'm very happy to do so. Kai says, who do you think has the coolest powers in Percy Jackson? Coolest powers? Probably Frank. I think Frank's skill set is really cool. Hazel also has a very significant skill set. Nico's is pretty cool. I'm kind of biased toward the Hades and Pluto types. But I think Frank also, just because the whole Animorphs thing, I think is really cool. Let's go to a question. I'm going to start wrapping things up here. So if for whatever reason I don't get to your questions, feel free to leave them not in the live chat, but then in the comments afterwards. But this one comes from Desmond Howard, who says, after you finish Blood of Olympus and Red Pyramid, what are you doing next on Patreon? Good question. So after we're done with the Red Pyramid, then we're going to continue with the Kane Chronicles series and go straight into Throne of Fire, which is the second book. And then after we're done with Blood of Olympus, then we'll do the Hunger Games. After Hunger Games, then we'll do the final of the Chronicles of Narnia books, The Last Battle. And then I believe we'll go to Catching Fire after that. So we'll do... I mentioned several months ago that I didn't want to do 2 Rick Riordan series at the same time. And then the opportunity came for me to do it and just like kind of push Red Pyramid. And I love both of the books, but I will say that as a narrator, reading 2 books by the same author twice a day is kind of exhausting for me. I miss the diversity that having another author in that mix helped with. And so I probably will never do 2 Rick Riordan books at the same time again. But yeah. So yeah, after we'll continue with Kane Chronicles, and then after Heroes of Olympus is done, then we'll do, like I said, Hunger Games, Last Battle, and then Catching Fire. Let's see here. Awesome 800 says, with the upcoming Percy Jackson book, would you do a live blind reading like you read the book for the first time with your own live reactions? I probably won't do live reactions. I think I could get significantly struck. I think actually, now that you said that, I might do that for my patrons. I think that would be cool to do a patron-only live stream of me, like live reading and live reacting to that. I did read Chalice of the Gods cold. I'd never read it before, but I didn't record myself reading it, if that makes any sense. Like, you didn't see my reactions to it. So now that you mention that's something I'll think about doing for my patrons as a kind of a special gift. I don't think that we could do that on YouTube. I think there might be some copyright issues with that, especially like the day or 2 after it comes out. Kyle O'Farrell says, you've probably covered this before, but do you have issues with copyright, with Rick stuff like you did with J.K. Rowling? No. We might in the future. I'm hopeful that that's not the case. I mean, I don't think Rick would be the issue. I think Disney would be the issue. But Rick has historically been very kind to people who use his content in their content, if that makes any sense, whether it be fan fiction or whether it be audiobooks, whether it be just content creation in general. There are versions. So if you were to look for a Harry Potter audiobook, you would not find a full form, or very often you wouldn't even find a chapter form that has been up for more than a few months, right? Whereas with Percy Jackson, you could look up The Lightning Thief, and you might find a video of someone reading the entirety of The Lightning Thief that's been up for 7 years. That usually tells you how authors and their legal teams feel towards content creation. Rick Riordan, I feel fairly safe with, hopefully. That's my claim to fame, for lack of a better term. So I'd be very, very heartbroken if the day were to ever come where that happens to us as a channel. But I'd still do it over on Patreon for free and over on Vimeo as well. So let's see here. Messy Alienhead says, what is your opinion on the Inheritance Cycle book series? I like them. I will say the older I get, the more that I can tell it was written by a teenager. It's still very good and very well written. But whereas when I was his age, it was very impressive. Nowadays, I can see some cracks in the earlier writings. But beyond that, like, the world building is great. The characters are great. It's a very good series. And if I did not know that it was written by a 15-year-old, I probably never would. But now, since I look for that, like, I can kind of tell. But I enjoy it very much. I've never read past the second book, so I'm curious to see how far we'll get on the channel. I'm about a quarter of the way through Aragon, and we will do it as a daily daily chapter book coming up eventually. But yeah, I enjoy it very much. Rachel was here, says favorite ship in PJO/HOO, Perkabeth for sure. Denki Kaminari says, I am always amazed by your voice acting capabilities because I listened to you reading Percy Jackson first, and then started reading your Harry Potter readings, and I thought it was another person. Well, thank you very much. I do my best not to make it sound like me reading, especially the Harry Potter stuff. I enjoy reading with a British accent more than I enjoy reading with with an American accent, because it allows me to feel swept up in another world, if that makes any sense. So that's probably why I like reading for Sadie more than Carter in Kane Chronicles, because Sadie has a British accent. Saber6 says, I hope you have fun on your vacation. Thank you very much. I'll send you guys some updates. Shimaro Plays says, when do you think you will read Chalice of the Gods? I've already read it. It'll be up on the channel after we're done with Blood of Olympus. I have it entirely recorded, and I did so several months ago, but I didn't want to put it out on the channel because that would be out of order of the series. So the day after we're done with Blood of Olympus, the entirety of Chalice of the Gods will be up on the channel. Mirage GSM says, I started reading Aragon and I got about half a page in before dropping it. I learned later that the author was very young, and I guess it was good for his age. Yes, it does take a bit to get through. Aragon gets better the longer it goes on. There are some TV shows and some books that are like that, where it doesn't quite start as strong. And I don't think it was he wrote it in order thing. The beginning of Aragon The beginning of Aragon bores me. It really does. Aragon doesn't really get going until the dragon hatches. It's just kind of a lot of world building and kind of a lot of feeling like this is Lord of the Rings ripoff. And then it really gets going once the dragons arrive. Sarah W says, can you say something in a British accent? I can. My wife and I next week will be we'll be flying into London. We'll be spending a few days in London, go to a variety of things. Obviously, I'm a Chelsea fan, and they are playing their opening match against Manchester City while we're there. We couldn't get tickets. Tickets sold out in under 2 hours, and I do not have the Chelsea membership to get those tickets. So we're going to go down the street from Stamford Bridge to the Chelsea Pensioner. If you guys want to visit and watch the match with us, that is Sunday the 18th. If you guys want to show up to the Chelsea Pensioner in Fulham and watch the match with my wife and I, that would be fantastic. Buy me a drink. That'd be fantastic. Chelsea Pensioner on the 18th. Sarah W. also says, what is Aragon about again? Aragon is about a boy who finds a magic dragon egg. I mean, that's kind of it. There is a story to it, but that is the general premise is a boy in a fantasy world finds a dragon egg and becomes a dragon rider. Awesome 800 says, when I'm deciding if I should read a book, I never read the first page. I flip to somewhere in the middle and see if I think it's interesting. That is an interesting strategy. I don't think it's wrong necessarily, but it's definitely not something I have ever done. I usually read reviews first. I'm going to try to finish up my pre-prepared questions and then rush through the chat real quick. So Sam Hinckley says, any more Book of Mormon coming soon? Yes, I try to just get to a chapter when I can. Grace Davies says, what did you think of House of the Dragon Season 2? I enjoyed it very much, a lot more than most people did. I wish it would have ended with the fall of King's Landing, or at least Rhaenyra ascending the Iron Throne, but I know they wanted to save that for Season 3. And I kind of think that killed the momentum of the finale. The finale definitely felt more like a setup than anything, and I know a lot of people are frustrated by that, and I think if they would have at least reached her arrival at King's Landing, I think the season would have been better. But otherwise, I thought it was solid. It's what I like about Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Neil Graybeck says, are you excited for Season 2 of Percy Jackson? I kind of answered that earlier in the stream, Neil, and just for time's sake, I'm not going to go through it again. Jim Hellman says, I remember you saying you were going to do a series of unfortunate events after Spiderwick Chronicles. When can we expect that on the channel? Good question. I'm going to try to have it up by the end of September, if not early October. Bryce Polovit says, which do you prefer, Heroes of Olympus or Kane Chronicles? For me, it's Heroes of Olympus. I think Heroes of Olympus is Rick Riordan's best series. I think his writing reaches its peak. I think his theme building reaches its peak. I think they are the most enjoyable characters of any of his series. And I'm really going to miss Heroes of Olympus, to be honest with you. Emma Faraday says, are you going to read Demigods and Magicians? Yes, I intend to read all of Rick Riordan's side books eventually. Wilf Gustafson says, when will you finish Harry Potter and the Cursed Child? Good question. Act 3 should be up for paying patron members on Tuesday. And then if you give it 3 or 4 weeks, I'm hoping to have the entirety of it up on Patreon and Vimeo for free. So early September is my goal right now. And then last pre-prepared question, Tom Gurman says, do you have a release schedule for Fire and Blood, or are you jumping around? I'm kind of jumping around. I know kind of everything that happens in Fire and Blood, and so I've kind of been jumping chapter to chapter. There are some chapters that are 10 pages long. There are some chapters that are 100 pages long. So if I can knock out all the short ones first, I'm going to try to do that before I go back and read the really, really long ones. All right, close things up here. If I don't get to your questions in the chat, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I will get to them next live stream. James E. Farrell says, what is your favorite book series you have done on the channel? I really love Harry Potter. My favorite series read that I have done, like from beginning to end, enjoyed the entirety of the series, was probably the Spiderwick Chronicles. All 5 books are up on the channel if you guys want them. Saber6 says, I like all the voices you do, even the female ones. They sound similar to you, but you can still tell they're female. I was very hesitant to do a feminized voice because I think that detracts from the character. I think it might be too distracting, and so I'm glad that you say that. Thank you very much. Dinky Kaminari says, do you always have to get the author's approval first, or do you just start some and hope you get no problems? So it's everything we do can be defended under fair use. And so we typically don't need author approval. But our issues come when we get the attention of legal teams, because YouTube's algorithm favors the copyright holder rather than the content creator, which is where we run into problems. And so we're trying to avoid as many problems as we can because we don't want to lose the channel. Kai says, when is the next scheduled chapter of Blood of Olympus come out? So speaking on East Coast terms, East Coast of the United States, Dune, a chapter of Dune will come out every day at 1 in the morning, and a chapter of Blood of Olympus will come out every day at 11 o'clock in the morning. That is Eastern Standard Time in the United States. And Rachel was here, says, when will the next live stream be? 3 weeks. So I am gone the next 2. I will see you guys on the 29th of August. So feel free to leave any questions that you have either in the comments below this video, on Discord, on Patreon, or just on any other of the videos on the channel. And I will hopefully get to them the next time we have it. That live stream, I'm thinking, will be at about 4 o'clock Eastern. We're going to move it up a little bit. Joseph Morrill says, the day George finishes Game of Thrones is a day we will rejoice. Time keeps on ticking, baby. It's been 13, going on 14 years coming up pretty soon. So, yeah, not looking too hot. But with that, I am going to wrap it up. I got to go eat dinner with my family and hope everything is all well. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate everything you do for me. I always mention I don't do this for the money. I do this because I enjoy reading. You guys give me the incentive to keep reading. And I love hearing the way that you guys connect with these stories through me and through this channel and through this community that we built. So thank you guys for everything that you do for me as a content creator. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I mentioned merchandise. If you guys want to check the link below, you guys can check me out on Cameo now. If you guys want me to send you guys a personalized message, that is cameo.com. You can just look for Echo Wirm over there. Harry Potter, Hunger Games stuff is over on Patreon and Vimeo for free. My second channel, Sheet G, is available if you want to look that up. There's a link to my music below. I think that's about it.